Spoštovani kolegi, vsem želim lep dan. Na začetku bom govoril v slovenščini. Zahvaljujem vam se za povabilo na Mednarodnoj poletni šoli za politično ekologijo. Posebna zahvala celotni ekipi organizatorjev iz ekipe Fokus. Seveda in res je lepo biti v Ljubljani. Keith Richards would say it's good to be everywhere. And now lecture. Before I go to lecture, real lecture, I think I have a really tough job. Probably all of you, maybe 90% of you, would like to go to bed and take a little nap after lunch, right? Am I right? So I will try to make this lecture a little bit funnier than usual. And I hope I will not be boring so much. I apologize for my not so good English, and I will quote my friends from Laibach band. Are you familiar with Laibach band? Anyone from Slovenia? Yes, you know. So my English is no heaven, my German even worse, but I can drive the spaceship across the universe. So let's drive. The past year, 2022, in Serbia had a green sign. It all started somewhere in November of 2021, the first protest against the Rio Tinto company, and it seemed like the whole Belgrade had exploded. Crowds of people on the streets, opposition politicians also on the streets, green flags of environmental movement on the streets too, highway blockade, which made me so nervous because my flat is just opposite of the highway in Belgrade, and it's going to ruin my price of my real estate. Also, ecology overnight had political power. Personally, it didn't seem to me that anything significant was changing in terms of raising awareness among the population of Serbia about environmental issues. Why? Citizens still drive cars recklessly and without necessity, because despite the apparent high cost of gasoline, it is still affordable for the average citizen. The idea of waste management and waste separation and recycling exists only as a label on the beverage cans, but not in people's minds. Why? Because separation for recycling taking too much time. You know, you have to put plastic in one garbage can, you have to put paper in another garbage can. I came back from work at 6 o'clock. I have to separate garbage until 8 o'clock. I don't have a time. So, real situation in Serbia, like everywhere, is they taking my free time. They taking my free time for my kids and my wife and my family or my partner, whatever. So, foreign investors, for example, come to Serbia because Serbia only has 18 environmental inspectors. So we have the laws about waste management, about nature conservation, but we don't have inspectors to control the situation. Maybe I exaggerating a little bit, but the situation is more or less comical. We think about nature conservation until it starts taking up too much time or our free time. On the other hand, the funny side of so-called ecology in Serbia is that we always target the state. The state is our primary target. Why? Because our first question is, what are government doing? What are ministers for protecting the environment doing? And we will always say nothing. But we cannot ask ourselves, what can we do to protect the environment? What's our duty? And that story lasted 40 years, almost 40 years. I think the same situation is everywhere because it's very hard to iron laundry that has been wrinkled for more than 40 years. But we are hoping that we can do it in one day. In reality, environmental awareness in Serbia is not something that happens overnight too. However, what happened overnight is the recognition of political power of ecology. This is the moment when social ecology actually becomes political ecology. On the other hand, ecology in Serbia has never been a sexy topic. Today, ecology in Serbia has not only become a sexy topic, but has been taken to the level of pornography. I will explain later. In further discussion, I will try to explain to you why I include Rio Tinto case in Serbia, and a lot of story about Jadar Valley, about jadarium, about lithium, about small village in Serbia, Donje Nedeljice. Probably 90% of Serbian citizens never heard about that small village and probably wealthy village of Donje Nedeljice. So, the structure of this lecture will be as follows. First step, new trends in the development of environmental movements with a brief overview of Serbia. Radicalization, second phase, or second step, radicalization of environmental movements in Serbia and the Rio Tinto case, causes and consequences. And the third step is maybe the toughest. What's next? So, probably you notice I don't have PowerPoint presentation because I hate PowerPoint presentation. I think PowerPoint presentation is karaoke for professors. And I'm coming from the last century when we don't have computers, so I want to talk to you. Okay, the first step, new trends in development of environmental movements with a brief overview of Serbia. Before I start with this lecture, I have to tell you that University of Belgrade, my faculty, Faculty of Political Sciences, started with topics of ecology in 1976. 4 years after conference in Stockholm. So we were pioneers in discussing about ecology in Europe, probably in the world. Now we have master program in Belgrade, master program environmental policy, and here are my 5 students. Raise up, kids. Okay. I'm very proud of them. This is marketing. This is advertising. So, going back after advertising. So environmental movements in Serbia emerged in the past century and like everywhere in Europe. And that's a consequence of the fear of possible impending apocalypse caused by human negligence and excessive environmental degradation. In order to avoid delving unnecessarily into the realm of the horror ecology, there is such a discipline, horror ecology. In this brief introduction, I will start with the causes of the emergency of environmental movements, or rather their position within new social movements. I think there is 3 phenomena which can describe the rise of environmental movements in the world and in Serbia too. The first and foremost is the strengthening of civil liberties in the second half of the past century, which enabled different forms of self-organization of social groups, particularly outside of the sphere of traditional formulas such as political parties. The second phase, modern states gradually reduce their influence in the decision-making process regarding the future of society and focused on the traditional political issues and economic problems, neglecting other spheres of social life. The third phenomenon that influenced the creation of new social and consequently environmental movement is the consequence of the previous 2. New social phenomena demanded different forms of organization, the new ways of addressing social problems, whether they were caused by economic or political factors. Environmental problems resulting from industrialization, urbanization, biodiversity destruction, and dramatic energy consumption, including making PowerPoint presentation, were at one point sacrificed in the pursuit of greater purchasing power, higher GDP, and better living standard. In one word, social peace triumphed over ecological balance. To make prediction about future, of environmental movements, I would emphasize that the development of environmental movements has not been linear. From their inception to the present day, environmental movements have gone through 4 phases, or rather 4 waves, that have shaken the foundations of classical conservative democracy. Here I am referring to European environmental movements, but it's all the same for the rest of the world. The first phase I define as awakening and emergency phase, the formation of basic ideas, the selection of goals and means, as well as the way environmental movements were formed in the early 70s, indicative spontaneity in all these characteristics. Environmental movements were formed from various interests and civic initiatives, including even eco-terrorist organizations. The primary goals of the early modern environmental movements were ecology, or environmental protection, conservation of non-renewable natural resources, changing energy choices and policies, radical anti-nuclear stand, direct democracy, world peace and disarmament, and alternative lifestyles connected to the post-materialistic values. All of this could be achieved to a greater or lesser extent through political pressure on the government. So I stress this on political pressure on the government in combination with civil disobedience. Second phase is let's make a party, but not party with booze, but let's make a political party. So that second phase is the Green Party, when environmental movements, initially seemingly apolitical, transformed into political parties, namely the Green parties. In a way, this meant a loss of identity and introduction of institutionalization within the movement. Literally, it involved a departure from a different form of political struggle and falling into the trap of party life. From the perspective of green politics, the consequences of this shift were really dramatic. Spontaneity and directness gave way to the detailed and precisely defined organization, pressuring the government, which was previously achieved on the streets or through the street protests like in Serbia now transformed into political decision-making practices in parliaments. Creativity was replaced by marketing agency. Street protests turned into parliamentary battles, and rebellion turned into parliamentary compensation. In one word, all those things turned into the money. In third phase, which I defined as a complete marginalization, is the phase when environmental movements and their exclusion from the process of decision-making or co-decision-making regarding global or national environmental futures. And this is the phase where environmental movements are not merely political, but rather ideological political formed, and they're making them incompatible with managerial corporate structures. In the era of globalization, we witnessed a process of deglobalization of ecological movements, environmental movements, sorry. The escape of marginalization and media silence, certain global environmental movements, those that due to their international dimensions, did not redefine themselves as a political parties, transformed into eco-corporations, retaining all the characteristic goals and methods of their previous struggles, while advancing them alongside development of information technologies. Why do I refer to them as eco-corporation? Because in addition to the success of their actions, I'm thinking about PETA, for example, because in addition to the success of their actions and media presence, they began to measure their own economic efficiency and profitability. It was no longer enough to participate in their actions or campaigns or to be mentioned by the media as environmental movement in a positive or in a negative context, never mind that. Now it became necessary to sell merchandise such as t-shirts or coffee mugs with the logo of their organization on their own website. And now, of course, we have a board of directors in the same organization. The fourth and the final phase, or wave, conditionally named as a return to authentic values, represents a phase of resurrection in which environmental movements engage in the practice of communalism, fully developing post-materialistic values combined with an alternative economic vision based on community, cooperation, and solidarity in production and in consumption. Changes in value orientation align with the ideas of healthy living, that means organic food production, healthy food choices, veganism, vegetarianism, spirituality in various forms. In other words, they don't sell coffee mugs, they don't sell t-shirts, but they produce and sell healthy food. Many critics of these new ecological, environmental, communal production movements highlight their utopian, romantic characteristics, suggesting that they are transient and trendy like other passing trends. Social media created something, and now, which exists, is I define it as living room ecologism. I make a distinction between ecologism and environmental, as Andrew Dobson did before me. So living room ecologism is that from your chair or from your couch, you can create an environmental movement on your computer and in so-called virtual reality. You can create profiles, plan gatherings and actions, motivate followers, make lists of ecological issues, and emphasize their urgency. You organize or support actions and then beautifully document them with the photos of your organization's social media profile. Information is fast and furious and accessible in milliseconds. All you need is time to engage in real action or support it in a couch or living room ecologism. In this new phase, the reality of these new environmental movements seems distorted. Mass participation, meaning involvement in physical space and time in concrete action. It's measured in two ways: the number of likes or clicks and the number of actual participants in a protest. Both numbers are equally important. Here I have in mind 2 or 3 environmental movements that define themselves as a global environmental movements: Extinction Rebellion, Fridays for Future, and the third one is Stop the Oil. After defining themselves in virtual reality, they are ready to step into the real world. And of course, they are, I mentioned before, Stop the Oil movement. You know, the people who glue themselves on some objects or dealing with the Heinz soup in museums. We don't have such a movement in Serbia, thankfully, not yet. The next one is influencer ecologism, or inspiring ecologism through new social media. Greta Thunberg, for example, the girl who is angry at her government and the whole world for their inaction against climate change, becomes one sort of an eco-icon. Whether she's eco-icon or eco-product, she undoubtedly serves as a real inspiration for her generation. In the meantime, Greta has grown up, been arrested a few times, but she's still angry at the world. This may not be good for her as an individual, but it draws attention to the issue. In Serbia, influencer ecologism exists, but is present in a different dimension. While Greta promotes new global values, in Serbia, the position of ecology is determined with influence ecologism as a part of individual values. That is a place of environmental ethics with personal ethical system. For example, portals, social media, blogs, online magazines, which include ecological context among other things, create personalities that have can have influence in any way, and in this case, promote environmental values. The situation is quite confusing. From one sort of outpouring of general love for sustainable development and recycling, as if it were love for a living being, to statements that not only aim to promote these respectable ideas, but also to promote the individual who can influence and change other individuals' environmental consequences. Conscious. Influenced ecologism does not contribute to the promotion of environmental values. It is a self-promotion where ecology or concern for the state of the environment is just a fraction of the mosaic. Influencer ecologism is just a new trend, which means it's fashionable. Just as it is fashionable by its nature, it is also exhausting, and its utility value is limited, including its duration. Is it inspiring? Probably only for those in the same social milieu and those who share the general values of the influencers. I don't think that is inspiring for others. Let me clarify this with one example. A person, discretion guaranteed, from Serbia, who could be maybe Greta's grandmother in terms of age, gives the following answer to the question, what are your tricks and tips for a greener day? That was posted in Sun Serbia Eco online magazine. So the person answer is, my ecological awareness first started with my wardrobe. It all began when it was publicly revealed that the fashion industry is the second most polluting industry after oil. How can I help? I wear scarves with jellyfish designs exclusively from the time when Gianni, she means Versace probably, was alive. I confiscated Alexander Joksimović mosaic jacket. Alexander Joksimović was a famous Serbian fashion designer when I was maybe 10 years old. That was in 1974. And I had enough years, she continued, to be the owner of a vintage little black dress that has been through so much it belongs in a heart-wrenching romance novel. Influencer ecologism undermines the environmental movement because it dilutes the core idea that the movement represents. As a result, it is possible that in the near future we may have an environmental movement intended for or created solely for the wealthy people, those who possess more than the social majority in society. In other words, only the wealthy will be able to afford a healthy lifestyle and a healthy environment. David Byrne from the Talking Heads in the song Future, sang, only the wealthy will be healthy. So maybe only the wealthy will be ecologically ready for the new era. The next subphenomenon present here is roughly similar to the previous one. It is now a celebrity ecologism, or ecologism of famous individuals. I consider it is a subphenomenon because certain environmental movements and organizations use famous personalities from the world of cinema and music, what we commonly refer as the stars, to promote their lifestyles and ecological habits, serving as an inspiration to others. So I'm not familiar with Kardashians. I'm not familiar with Jelena Karleuša. The people from Serbia probably knows the Jelena Karleuša. Yes, probably you agree with Jelena, but Jelena was a PETA star for a German PETA website, and Jelena Karleuša eating meat. So you cannot promote PETA and eating the meat, right? Okay, maybe here in Slovenia, Senida, right? She is not faced for PETA or something like that. Okay. Ecologism of stars. So I'm a little bit familiar with Paul McCartney maybe, or with Iggy Pop, or with Morrissey, but one of the subphenomena that can be inspiring for the creation of future global environmental movements is called also tabloid ecologism. dissemination of alarming news. We are all living in red and orange alerts about the state of the environment. Often bordering on panic-inducing information and data can inspire the development of environmental awareness with creating some new environmental problems. However, it may not be necessarily lead to the mobilization of social groups to achieve concrete ecological goals or solve some environmental problems. This is especially true when considering the tabloid ecologism is often based on a fake news that is not documented and clearly supported by evidence, thus remaining at the level of some sort of ecological myth. You know, there is a story in every news. There is some plastic island in some ocean, but never of us saw that plastic island. Maybe only in Gorillaz CD in song Plastic Beach, but we never saw plastic island floating in some ocean. Okay. In Serbia, let's say something about Serbia. We also have, I think Slovenia also have this. This is camping, glamping ecologism. It involves being in nature, connecting with the nature, promoting eco-values, all while not disconnecting from modern technologies. Essentially, it's a form of luxury and glamorous camping with super fast internet and instantly post pictures on Instagram. About 2 years ago, one such camping glamping experience in Serbia was designed to promote famous Serbia brand of water brand. That was nearly led to the destruction of the colony of bats that's millions of years old. That was Rajko's cave, no Nick's cave, Rajko's cave in near Majdanpek in eastern part of Serbia. And discretion is not guaranteed now. The brand owner didn't care and gathered top eco-influencers in practice. The name of the brand is Rosa Water, and the name of the owner of the Rosa brand water is, what do you think? Which company? Coca-Cola, right. So Coca-Cola is not green, never green. And now the second phase is radicalization of environmental movements in Serbia and the Rio Tinto case. Causes and consequences. For years, environmental movements in Serbia have been in the process of finding their place and role within the framework of new social movements. We must acknowledge that ecology has not been so popular in Serbia. As I mentioned before, it's never been a sexy topic. Now it's some sort of pornography. I think we missed or skipped the erotic phase in ecology in Serbia. In this sense, I make some distinction between pure environmental activism and political environmental activism. Pure environmental activism, which has led to the creation of certain environmental movements in Serbia in the last decade of the previous century, aimed primarily to address specific environmental issues in local communities that really affecting the quality of life of the residents. Its dimension was special, focused on the local environment and specifically apolitical, as it did not venture into the realm of traditional politics in terms of making classical or classic political demands, such as seizing political power. This means that the goal of these movements was not to overthrow any local or central government, but solely to resolve existing problems. The third decade of this century brings changed image. Ecology became popular, modern, and indispensable in social and therefore in political life. Environmental movements in Serbia are slowly changing their fundamental, previously mentioned function and entering a specific segment characterized by the politicization of environmental issues. The cause of this politicization is multifaced. First, it is increased economic activity in Serbia after year 2000, which led to the situation where many foreign investment and investment contracts were non-transparent. We don't know what they sign, we don't know what they explore, so everything was non-transparent. This was facilitated by a new wave of international capital, which was no longer moving from one country to another due to cheap labor, but rather because of the absence of environmental laws or their porosity. For example, the new application of environmental laws, if they exist at all. The second cause is the political disregard for environmental issues that have arisen as a result of economic activities in Serbia from 1990 until today, as well as those inherited from the socialist period. The essence is that in such cases, environmental movements slowly lost their emancipatory character and acquired a typical political role where ecology often became nothing more than bait. Particular problem in this defined cause is that the central government in Serbia has not consistently taken care of the real needs of local communities, both in terms of the economy and the environments, and that for years. The next cause of the radicalization of environmental movements in Serbia has emerged as a result of another dimension of environmental globalization in terms of introducing domestic environmental movements to radical methods of action or activity similar to those movements from abroad. The case of Rio Tinto, Serbia now is very famous for this case. The case of Rio Tinto may not have been a case if Aleksandar Vučić were not in power as the president of the country and the Serbian Progressive Party, SNS, as the majority party in Serbia. Serbia had two extreme environmental industrial cases before Rio Tinto, but the political dynamics were completely opposite today. The first example is from year 2003, when the American company, very famous company, USS Steel, purchased the Smederevo steel mill. It was the first big and major American investment in Serbia. The value of the steel mill, probably 100 years old, tradition old, was the same as the price of a Red Star Belgrade football player who was sold the same year. So they bought a steel mill very cheap. US Steel promised to respect environmental laws, nothing. Invest in environmental protection, nothing. Build new access roads, nothing. Not lay off workers, nothing. And so on, and so on, and so on. However, during rapid economic transition, US Steel found that they had to sell steel mill, and now government of Serbia bought from the US steel mill for $1. Now the steel mill in Smederevo has a new owner, and the new owner is, what do you think? Which country? China. So not America, now is China. Okay, like in Gorenje was Slovenian company, now in China. In political view, Democratic Party was in power in that time. Now, Democratic Party in Serbia is opposition. And the steel mill is still in the hand of Chinese. The second example was the so-called possible, impossible problem of building of an oil refinery in the Smederevo. The case is from 2010. I said that is very comical situation with this refinery in Smederevo. Smederevo is a small town on the Danube River, maybe 60 kilometers away from Belgrade, right? Luka? Smederevo, 60 kilometara od Beograda. Tako. never mind that. So very close to Belgrade. Now, the interest, we have one company of unidentified geographical origin. The company is some consortium, Comico Oil. So that's a funny story, funny part of the story. Comico Oil, comical, right? So the situation was really comical. Comico Oil Consortium was had intention to construct an oil refinery in the city of Smederevo by processing oil to be imported by ships from, what do you think, country? From which country? From Russia? No. From China? No. From Venezuela? No. 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 Nigeria. So imagine the way of the tankers, of the ships, floating from Nigeria, because I don't have power presentation, right? Imagine in Nigeria here, tap, 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 Black Sea, Danube River, Smederevo. That was a very smart idea, I think, a very expensive idea. So that's not the point of the price of the oil. The consortium saw advantage in cheap investment, proximity to the Danube River and Corridor 10, which offered good transportation and infrastructure. The local government was also interested in the project as it could lease the unused and neglected agricultural land. Both sides, the consortium and the local government, concealed the environmental risk associated with the refinery, focusing on the investment amount, the number of employees, and the overall economic benefits for the Smederevo region and the country, that means Serbia. The total value of the project was estimated at $250 million American dollars, plus a land lease price of $4.2 million US dollars for 99 years. So I used the calculators to calculate something, and per year, this amount, that sum, has very interesting number. So when you calculate the sum per year of investment is $42,4240, comma, 24, 24, 24, 24, 24, 24, 24. Per month is $3,535, comma, 35, 35, 35, 35, 30, it's on, that's mathematics. Per day is only $294 US dollars for 1 day, leasing the agricultural land to build refinery of oil. The investors also emphasized the construction of a 38.5 kilometer branch pipeline from Pančevo. Pančevo is another refinery oil village place, and the distance between Pančevo and Smederevo is less than 40 kilometers. So in the circle of 40 kilometers, you have two refinery oil. We are not Iraq, we are not Iran, we are not Qatar, we are not Saudi Arabia. So the value of investment in the regional local pipeline was estimated around $15 million, paid by the people, not investors, etc., etc., etc. The point of this example is that Comico Oil wanted to pay in all amount of money in 3 installments, but the local government, they want it all in advance. So exit from this situation was, let's make citizens referendum. Because we have a conflict within political structures represented in the local government. One of the political leaders from the ruling party coalition in Smederevo made the following statement: "We believe that the referendum is unnecessary because it delays the investment process and it's against investing in Smederevo, and it will slow them down even though they mean new jobs. Democratic Party was in power. Opposition was SNS. The referendum was scheduled with the ruling coalition boycotting, so the Democratic Party boycotted the referendum, but referendum was failure because only 11% of citizens participated. Comic oil disappeared. No one heard about comic oil again. So that was a really funny story. The second example, the third one, is the famous Rio Tinto case. What's behind the Rio Tinto? Rio Tinto is the case that can serve as an example of how radical environmental movements can emerge overnight in Serbia. In late 2020 and early 2021, relatively peaceful civil protests were held in Belgrade in Serbia, as said before, the whole Belgrade has exploded. And that was some sort of riots against Rio Tinto involvement in the further exploitation of lithium ore. Rio Tinto as a multinational company is full of controversies and has shown its previous activities worldwide that it may be environmentally irresponsible and prioritize profit over environmental well-being in its geological exploitation. However, it is likely that there is no multinational company in the world without same environmental stains in its career, for example, like Coca-Cola. With Rio Tinto, at least in Serbia, the situation is somewhat specific. Rio Tinto came to Serbia in 2004, 4 years after the fall of the Milosevic regime, to a country eager or hungry for foreign investments after years of economic sanctions and wars, of course, in the former Yugoslavia, particularly in the mining and heavy industry sectors. Mining development in Serbia dates back to the 13th century with the arrival of German miners, famous Saxons, and reached its peak in the period between the two world wars, although most ownership of the mines in Serbia during that period was in the hands of French, Belgian, and German capital. After World War II, the mines were nationalized, and the only state companies had rights for exploration, only state companies had rights for exploitation of some ore. After the political changes in October 2000 and immediately after privatization, Serbia became a target of many mining companies eager for cheap natural resources. Therefore, the arrival of Rio Tinto, perhaps not entirely by chance, a new ore called Jadarit, combined of lithium and boron, was discovered and officially recognized in 2006. This ore was immediately declared strategically important, crucial component for our batteries, etc., for the cars, mobile phones, scooters, bicycles, electric cars, laptops, etc., for everyday life. After the discovery of Jadarit and its potential value in lithium batteries, statements from political officials in Serbia, including all staff of Vučić and majority party SNS, they were for exploitation of Jadarit. What Rio Tinto certainly knowingly played in this case is insufficient environmental awareness of citizens combined with the low living standards, considering that the construction of a possible mine and other facilities would require the acquisition of privately owned land. So, they say, Živana Šakić from the village of Gornje Nedeljice said, they come to us and started exploring and digging some holes. It was welcomed by us, the villagers, as they paid a fair price for the land. That was in 2014 and 15. They hadn't reached me yet, but they had reached our neighbors, says Živana Šakić from the village, from the Gornje Nedeljice. She continues, and for years after, they told us nice stories about how we would earn well, how they found good ore, how it's not toxic. But we told them, you're not building us a spa, but a mine. That mine, lithium and boric acid, is dangerous. And they started telling us how we would get rich and offering us a good prices. In June of this year, Živana Šakić and her entire family started packing for their 200 square meter house and 1.3 hectares of land. They received 2,000 euros. The deadline to move was August 28. And Živana said after that, now I feel cheated and I regret it. Is there anything worse than this? Together with the house, 34 out of 83 houses have been sold so far. The described phenomena point out several important aspects related to the presence of the company of Rio Tinto in Serbia. The first phenomenon pertains to the campaigns launched against Rio Tinto as the start of Jadarit lithium exploitation. Environmental activists and newly formed environmental movements led campaigns aimed at demonstrating that the company itself is not environmentally responsible and that its presence in various countries has always been associated with the scandals and business moves that jeopardize not only ecological stability, but also people's lives and health. There arises the question of whether any company engaged in mining or any other form of natural resources, exploration and exploitation can be considered environmentally responsible or environmental friendly. It is challenging because such companies, by the nature of their activities, not only alter the overall image of nature, but also disrupt biodiversity, compromising natural life in the name of industrial survival and societal progress. On the other hand, if we have to go deeper, we would find that there is hardly any company in the world, from the textile and mining to the food industries, whose activities have not been tainted by the scandals, corruptions, lobbying, and even endangering people's health and lives. The second phenomenon associated with Rio Tinto is the legal nature of the company's activities in Serbia. As I mentioned before, at the beginning of this section, they have been present in Serbia since 2004. I'm certain that Rio Tinto did not randomly come to Serbia in 2004 and independently start exploring mineral wealth. I believe that there were no prior agreements or permits, but that is already a matter of legal rather than socio-political forensic analysis, especially considering the lack of transparency regarding economic agreements with foreign companies from 2000 year until today. The third phenomenon is the politicization of the entire, that means the politicization of the entire issue of Rio Tinto presence and activities in Serbia. The emergence of Rio Tinto, the secrecy of its exploration, campaigns through social media and internet have led to the polarization of political forces. On one side, opposition political parties have formed or supported local environmental movements opposing Rio Tinto. It seems to me that only local environmental movements and activists genuinely act in this case while taking advantage of the wave of their dissatisfaction. Opposition party, regardless of whether they were voluntarily chosen or forced, align themselves using the Rio Tinto case to emerge from marginalized or self-isolated political position. In this case, we are facing a situation that can be defined as the politicization of ecology, where the existing environmental problems is used to resolve a larger political issue rather than addressing the problem itself. How else can we explain the sudden interest of certain politicians in environmental issues and especially sustainable development? The fourth phenomenon I analyze in this context is the marketing, public relations, and lobbying conducted by the company Rio Tinto. Here I draw attention to a specific paid advertisement titled "Opportunity for the Best Graduates at Rio Tinto, Care, Courage, and Curiosity, Values that Shape New Leaders." Two things are crucial here. First, it presents the company's image in the positive environmental sense as a PR response to accusation of the company's environmental responsibility. It emphasized that ideas of sustainability, mining, and progress are not contradictory. The Rio Tinto says, guided by the values that support care, courage, and curiosity, a leader in mining for over 150 years fulfills its vision to be pioneer of progress. Now, Rio Tinto became pioneer of progress because they found lithium for batteries. The multinational company Rio Tinto, they say about themselves, they say, so the multinational company Rio Tinto deeply believes in responsible and sustainable production of materials necessary for human advancement. The very crucial phase now, or phenomenon, is the interest of President Vučić in all of this. In one of his meetings with the representatives of Rio Tinto, President Aleksandar Vučić expressed gratitude to the company for their willingness to discuss open issues and their dedication and understanding regarding demands for transparent work and the fulfillment of the most demanding conditions in the field of ecology. Really political statement. He stated, Vučić, that all projects in this area must meet the highest environmental and technological standards, as there can be no healthy economic development without preserving a healthy environment. Another political bullshit. President Vučić emphasized that the state will strictly enforce the implementation of strict environmental measures. Third bullshit. During a press conference, Vučić also highlighted that if necessary, the state would hold a referendum on whether to start lithium exploitation. That was not bullshit. As the president of Serbia and based on his power, Vučić, who should perhaps be the least interested person in Serbia when it comes to the considering such environmental problems, offers two solutions through the instrumentalization and politicization of this environmental issue, where both the politicization and the environmental problems have gone too far. One solution is the possibility of organizing a referendum, stepping out of classical democracy and moving towards direct democracy. The second solution that Vučić offered at that time was not widely commented in the media. Namely, he stated that he expects that in addition to the future mining industrial complex of Jadar, the project would also include battery factories and products dependent on lithium to create as many new jobs as possible. One could interpret this statement as a kind of political ultimatum coming from the highest level addressed to the Rio Tinto. However, it seems that things are different. If Rio Tinto's intention were only to exploit the new ore of the future, Serbia would become an example of new eco-imperialism. For example, a new resource base for technology-advanced countries that need lithium. This would not be favorable either. The Gordian knot was cut by the decision of the government of Serbia in January 20, 2021 to put an end to the Jadar project and revoke all administrative acts related to the Rio Tinto. However, this does not mean that Rio Tinto has completely left Serbia. Rio Tinto waiting. The company remains the nominal owner of the land it acquired. With almost every public address in Serbia from January of last year until today, President Vučić consistently raises the issue of the damage caused by the Serbian government's decision in 2021 to conditionally ban all further exploitation and activities of Rio Tinto in the Jadar River Valley. He defines it as a missed opportunity for Serbia to become a global leader in lithium exploitation, although data on this new ore wealth does not necessarily support such a claim. However, this does not prevent him, Vučić, through tacit agreement with the government's decision from simply removing the issue of lithium exploitation from the list of problematic topics during the 2022 election campaign. From political perspective, those who are currently in power were in opposition when it comes to the Smederevo steel mill plant and Comico refinery in Smederevo. With the Rio Tinto case, the situation is reversed. The radicalization of environmental movements in Serbia has emerged as a result of nationalization of certain environmental issues. I won't delve into discussion on how real or political constructed these environmental problems were. That would require a special lecture. When I say that environmental problems have been nationalized, I primarily mean that environmental movements in Serbia have transitioned from the local phase to the national level. Let's take the movement Ne davimo Beograd, Don't Drown Belgrade as an example, originally conceived as a local environmental movement, but in practice primarily a political movement. It emerged as a new and uncompromised opposition to Vučić's Serbian Progressive Party, or SNS. Their environmental actions were designed at the level of classic politics rather than environmental patterns. Ne davimo Beograd protested not because the two rivers in Belgrade, the Sava and the Danube, were the city's sewage collectors, but because an old, neglected and dangerous part of Belgrade was being transformed into Vučić's urbanistic Frankenstein vision called Belgrade waterfront. Ne davimo Beograd invented or reactivated something that had already existed in Belgrade in 1994, in 1996, which are protest walks and street blockades. Another noteworthy ad hoc environmental movement that started as local and ended up as national is the movement Odbranimo reke Stare planine, defend the rivers of Stara planina. It seems that Vučić inherited all the pressing environmental problems from the previous governments. In fact, that is true, just as it is true that he and his ruling coalition did not attempt to tackle these problems in a timely manner by riding the wave of environmentalism in Serbia. Odbranimo reke Stare planine movement emerged with the aim of preventing the construction of small hydropower plants on Stara planina, very beautiful mountain near the border with Bulgaria. The general political climate that the members of the Odbranimo reke Stare planine movement has fostered indicates radicalization manifested in elements of some sort of eco-terrorism. Their activities, such as demolishing installation with the mini hydropower plant complex or opposing the techniques of the Rio Tinto company, may seem sympathetic and garner support from the broader public. In November and December of 2021, Belgrade, as well as certain places in Serbia, faced constant weekend blockades of highways and the other main roads by environmental activists from the various environmental and political movements. For example, Ne davimo Beograd, environmental uprising, or okoljski ustanak, Kreni pokreni, etc., etc. Such radical movements in this century is problematic for several reasons. Firstly, to the average citizen of Serbia, it may all seem original, but is ultimately a poor imitation of what was happening in the United Kingdom in Germany in the mid-1970s, last century. In other words, it's a poor copy of what some of today's globally renewed environmental movements were doing in the past. No matter how original the idea of blocking highways may seem, it is frustrating for those citizens who find themselves stuck in these blockades with their cars or living, like me, opposite of the highway. In this way, the blockade causes more political damage than political benefit. However, in June and July of this year, the protests no longer have their ecological goals, but maintain ecological methods, such as protest walk and, of course, blocking the highway again. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, Serbian environmental movements have not escalated their goals further, as Extinction Rebellion or Friday for Future or Stop the Oil are doing today. No one has attempted to destroy something in the National Museum in Belgrade, not yet. Environmental movements in Serbia are highly politically motivated to the point where they no longer see themselves as environmental movements, but rather as a political party for whom a specific issue serves as a stepping stone in building a political career. This is very evident, for me, that's my point of view, with the coalition We Must, Moramo, which can be defined as an urban elite environmental movement and the movement Ecological Uprising, known for its leader who was at the forefront of the fight against the construction of mini hydroelectric power plants in Serbia. Environmentalism is currently in vogue in Serbia. Former politicians from past regimes are eager for their political reformation. The academic elite wants to demonstrate that they are above all other elites. Public figures are eager to regain their media and other positions. In conclusion, ecology can become the new politics in Serbia, and radical environmentalism can become a new ideology, but the question of environmental protection is such an important question that it does not require polarization, politicization, or depoliticization, but rather the achievement of national political consensus in Serbia. The question is how capable both the government and the opposition are of realizing this both today and in the future. And the third part of this lecture is what's next. Predicting the future is very difficult. What I can predict globally is that in the future, two paths in environmental movements will develop globally and in parallel. One is virtual, digital, and the other one is real or indigenous. The first, virtual, will be composed of those people who are satisfied with this civilization and its so-called progress and who will recycle, while the others are those who would like and will succeed to break free from the traps of civilization and capitalism and the all comforts it brings. This would mean, referring to the later, the voluntary departure, but also voluntary entry into the real nature without returning to primitive ways. I choose the other one, although it is already a bit late for me. Why the latter? Because I believe that this century is not more human compared to the previous one. It is not more human towards people or nature. And it won't be, no matter how optimistic we are. And another prediction about the future and about lithium in Serbia. I will allow myself the freedom to make a little prediction. As soon as there is a change in power in Serbia someday, I predict that the issue of lithium exploitation will be brought up again, but this time with a new evidence emphasizing that it involves a new technology that is environmental friendly and that Rio Tinto truly cares about the environment, etc., etc., etc. This is primarily because Rio Tinto has not definitely existed in Serbia. It seems to me that they are waiting for the new political partner with more nerves, and they gave all to one thing, which is very special to Serbia, it's corruption. Thank you very much.